It has gone down as among the fiercest feuds in the history of science, popularly known as the Bone Wars. Between 1877 and 1892, two American paleontologists became bitter rivals, each trying to outdo the other by discovering the best example of dinosaur fossils from species both known and new. In what the press called the Great Dinosaur Rush, they used their respective wealth and influence to fund fossil hunting expeditions into the rich bone beds of Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming. The protagonists were Othniel Charles Marsh of Yale University and Edward Drinker Cope of the University of Pennsylvania. Marsh is considered one of the greatest proponents of Darwinism in 19th century America and would make the connection between dinosaurs and modern birds. Cope, a child prodigy, published his first scientific paper at the age of 19 and would publish over 1,400 such papers in a record rivaled by few others. The competition became so personal that each tried to discredit and even publicly humiliate the other. They bribed landowners and fossil men, resorting to stealing or even destroying their rivals' specimens. In their haste to gain an advantage, they employed dynamite to remove as much rock as quickly as possible, almost certainly blowing up fossils in the process. They haphazardly rushed interpretations of their finds, causing Cope to put the head at the wrong end while reconstructing a plesiosaur skeleton, while Marsh put the head of a brachiosaur on the body of a brontosaur. Their brute force methods gave American paleontology a proverbial black eye in the rest of the world. But the public was infected with a sort of dinosaur mania, as newspapers reported their discoveries of ancient giant beasts with hard-to-pronounce names. Indeed, the Bone Wars remain in the modern pop culture zeitgeist, being the subject of books, magazines, graphic novels, television shows, board games, fictionalizations, and more. The epic clash of egos was as cowboyish as the Wild West and as gaudy as the Gilded Age, an almost Shakespearean tragedy that ultimately consumed its gladiators. In strict numbers, Marsh won by discovering 80 new species of dinosaurs to Cope's 56, including fan favorites like Stegosaurus and Triceratops. But in terms of published scientific papers, however, the prolific Cope was the clear winner. But in the end, neither really won. The feud had nearly ruined them both, financially and professionally. And it would be around a decade before American paleontologists were taken seriously again by their peers abroad. The irony was Marsh and Cope had started out as friends and colleagues. They had first crossed paths in the winter of 1863 at the University of Berlin, where Marsh was studying. Cope came from a pacifist Quaker family, and his father, not wanting his son caught up in the American Civil War, had sent him to Europe on the Grand Tour, where he met among the most highly esteemed scientists of the era. Cope stayed with Marsh in Berlin for several days, and they continued a correspondence back home, sharing manuscripts, specimens, and ideas. So how did these two otherwise brilliant scientists come to fall out in such a dramatic fashion? This is where the New Jersey history connection comes in. The marl pits of South Jersey had long been a source of income for the men who mined them. Marl, or marlstone, is formed in freshwater environments from hardened deposits of carbonate minerals, clays, and silts. Farmers had long since discovered that it could be used as a neutralizing agent in acidic soil, and it was an ingredient in the making of cement. But marl is also good at preserving fossils. Farmers and miners have been finding fossilized bones since the 1830s. In 1858, William Parker Falk, a Philadelphia lawyer with a penchant for paleontology, discovered a species of Hadrosaurus at Haddonfield, New Jersey. It would become the first reconstructed dinosaur skeleton to be mounted for display and was named as New Jersey's official state dinosaur in 1991. In 1867, Cope and his family had settled in Haddonfield, establishing relationships with the area's farmers and marl pit owners, who agreed to let him know if they unearthed any fossils. The year before, Marsh had become curator of Yale's Peabody Museum of Natural History. He had convinced his wealthy but elderly uncle, financier and philanthropist George Peabody, that establishing the institution would make for a fine legacy. Now, Marsh needed specimens with which to fill the cases in the halls of his new museum. Cope's network in the marl pits of South Jersey had been successful in producing exactly what Marsh was looking for, and it was certainly cheaper and easier than mounting expeditions into the still wild American West. So he wrote Cope asking if he would be so kind as to give him a tour of the marl pits around Haddonfield. As the two men rode along in their horse-drawn cart, Marsh made special note of who the property owners and workers were. Then, behind Cope's back, the wealthier Marsh bribed them to divert any found fossils not to the Philadelphia institutions that Cope had been working with, but up to Connecticut and his Peabody Museum. Cope was deeply stung by his friend's apparent betrayal. finding himself shut out of the areas of South Jersey he had come to consider his own personal turf. So the Bone Wars that raged out in the Wild West, they were sparked thanks to a New Jersey history connection. The story of the Dust Bowl reads like a quintessential American fable of hope and hubris. This apocalyptic ecological catastrophe formed the backdrop for the worsening economic one of the Great Depression. Yet the sheer scale of the Dust Bowl that ravaged the American Midwest between around 1934 and 1940 is hard to grasp today. Farmers began going bust from the failure of crops unable to survive in the parching heat. Dust storms became increasingly common and shockingly large. In fact, there was something almost biblical in the scale of what was happening. Increasing fears of potential famine were punctuated by dust storms so thick they were being dubbed black blizzards. The role humans had played in the disaster, however, was slow to be accepted by the very people being impacted. What they needed was help from someone who understood both their nature, but also the complicated science behind the interplay of climate and the land. And this is where a New Jersey history connection comes into the picture.